Welcome to the Outdoor Biz Podcast, your home for inspiring conversations with outdoor insiders. Each week, author, speaker, adventurer, and outdoor industry veteran Rick Saez talks in-depth with iconic brand founders, sales and marketing pros, product designers, and industry rising stars. Listen in when Rick's guests offer actionable advice to land your ideal industry gig and grow your outdoor career. Catch us again when the conversation shifts to the hottest outdoor products, destinations, and the latest industry insights. And now, here's Rick.
Hey everyone. This week I'm speaking with someone who has a job many of us would love to have. Dan Nelson. Dan is a gear tester and editor with GearInstitute.com. He's a veteran outdoor journalist and author of numerous guidebooks, and is currently serving as the Public Information Officer for the Olympic Region Clean Air Agency. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, great to be talking with you this morning. So you say you're in the Pacific Northwest with a little bit of a storm coming in, huh?
Yeah. I'm actually down in the Olympia area, south of Seattle. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of rain coming and snow and stuff? What do you think?
A lot of, looks like they call it the atmospheric river is heading our way for the weekend. So got a lot of wind and up to 4 or 5 inches of rain in our area this weekend. So
you'll be inside.
Which means feet of snow in the mountains. So
good. You need that. We all need that, right?
Yeah.
So you'll probably be inside most of the weekend?
Yeah. We'll probably be doing more renovation and home projects. We bought a new place on some acreage this year. So
cool.
Spending our COVID quarantines remodeling a house.
That's a good project to have, actually.
Yeah, it turned out perfect for this year. It's like, okay, we're isolating, so let's spend it productively.
Yeah, good timing. That's perfect. So how were you introduced to the outdoors and adventure?
Well, I grew up in Eastern Washington. My family's all Minnesota natives, but we moved to Eastern Washington when I was a tot and grew up in a little farm community in Southeast Washington, right in the corner of the state by Idaho and Oregon, down in the Blue Mountains, which most of your listeners aren't going to know.
Never heard. Yeah, I never heard of
country,
them. Blue Mountains. No,
If you heard of Hell's Canyon, we're not too far from there.
So okay, got you.
The Blue Mountains form the western edge of that, the Umatilla. So anyway, I grew up in the mountains and the foothills and out along the Snake River breaks and riding dirt bikes and snowmobiles and hiking, and started hunting and fishing early teens, probably when one of my older brothers got into it and really developed a passion for hunting and fishing. And he's 5 years older than me, and he helped introduce me to that. And he actually went on to become a game warden in that part of the country. And I fell into another part of the outdoor industry. So
yeah, does he still do that?
He actually retired from the game department, went to work as a school resource officer for his local community. He wanted to keep giving back to his community, so he worked in the school as the on-site county sheriff and working with kids, and really loved that. And just recently, actually last month, was elected to the county commissioner there.
Oh, wow. Good for him.
So he's really dedicated to his community and that part of the state and making sure that he's giving back to everything he got from the community. So
that's great. Yeah. And how did you start writing? How did the writing career come to be?
Well, writing I actually kind of fell into as well. I attended Washington State University, which is again in Eastern Washington, about 2 hours north of where I grew up. And I'd always enjoyed writing as a kid and through high school and into college, and needed some cash in hand as a poor college student. So I looked in the want ads and saw the school paper at WSU, an independently run newspaper as part of the college. The School of Journalism at WSU is the Edward R. Murrow School. It's where Edward R. Murrow attended college in his day.
So there's some writing chops there.
Yeah, and so to maintain the journalistic independence and standards, they set up the paper as a independent newspaper that wasn't influenced by the school administration.
Mm-hmm.
And so they actually paid their student writers pretty well. And so I sought a part-time job there and had no journalism background, wasn't in the journalism program. I just thought I could write, and they agreed with me and fell into it. And by the second year I was there, I was on the editorial board and became the editorial page editor. And
wow. So you're a natural.
Yeah, I was actually in the civil engineering track at the time. So
that's different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. Is there any writers in your family? Anybody else write?
Nope. I'm it.
Wow, that's interesting. Good for you.
So, and I attribute a lot of it to, I just have a passion for learning new things. And that's a great talent or characteristic for a journalist, to want to learn things, and to the point where I bounced around through all kinds of different classes at the university. I just took classes that I enjoyed instead of things in a specific track. So
did you end up with a degree though?
I ended up with a degree and 4 minors. So
okay, that's cool.
I had enough credits for 2 degrees, but none in the lined up right. So I just ended up with, I have a degree in history and minors in political science, math, English, and general science.
So where does that curiosity come from? Does that come from your family?
I think it probably does. I had very supportive folks that encouraged me to do whatever I wanted in life, and pursue my own goals and dreams. And I've always been a reader. I've started reading novels that my dad passed down when I was 8 or 9. When I was reading some
War and Peace at 8 years old.
I read Dickens, I think, at 12.
Okay, yeah. That's interesting. So I'm sure that curiosity helps you as a gear guy, right? When did you realize you were a gear junkie? Was that early on?
Well, I think, again, probably early in life. As a teen, I realized again, in the small farm community we had one of those old school mercantile type stores where it was a hardware store, but they also sold clothing and kitchenware and household knickknacks and basically anything you would need on the farm, you could find in some moldy corner of that store. And they had a corner of their hardware section dedicated to hunting and fishing gear. And when I wasn't outside playing or inside reading, I was in that store pouring through the fishing lures. And
when did you start writing about gear?
That I really started shortly after college. I left college, again, no journalism classes ever, but I was immediately taken on as a journalist on a Western Washington newspaper. And so I fell into just the general beat, the rookie reporter covering a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And
murders.
One of the beats I picked,
all of it. Yeah.
Writing obits and covering boring committee meetings of various local governments. But one of the beats I picked up was environmental news.
Oh, cool.
And this was back in 89, I guess.
Okay.
And I also, at the time, I was a twice weekly newspaper that was owned by the local daily. So I was doing work for both of the papers. And on the twice weekly, since there was so few staff, the writers took turns working on features and weekly columns as well. And so I started plugging in my outdoor adventures into my column just for a topic to cover. And that worked with some of the environmental news. I could do some crossover. And so I started covering local outdoor clubs and local adventures I was doing in the feature work as well. And after about a year and a half, that led to a new job with the Washington Trails Association, a nonprofit organization. And they hired me to basically turn their monthly newsletter into a real magazine.
Wow.
And
that's
so
cool.
that was a huge undertaking.
Yeah, I bet.
So I built a magazine basically from a 6 or 8 page newsletter. And one of the new sections I created was a gear news, just to pull in advertising as a hook. That was my original thinking, was if I want the local gear makers to support us, let's talk about their gear.
Right.
And that worked, and Washington Trails magazine became Northwest Trails, and it took off and did really well. And within less than a year of launching that magazine, I was contacted by Backpacker magazine and started providing them with Northwest coverage and gear reviews. So,
wow, good for you. And that magazine's still around today, right? Washington Trails?
That is still around. And Washington Trails, I'm proud to say when I was hired, the nonprofit was on a downward slide in membership. They had some leadership issues and they weren't doing well. I think they had dropped down to just over 1,000 members statewide. And when I left 11 years later, we had over 12,000 members.
Wow, good for you.
The magazine was in retail stores all over the Pacific Northwest, and we had actually launched a volunteer trail program, the executive director and I.
Oh, cool.
That went from 0 hours of volunteer work to becoming the leading trail maintenance organization in the Western United States, with over 200,000 hours of volunteer work each year.
That's great. Boy, our trails sure need it these days, don't they? Man,
yeah.
That's good. So tell our listeners about the Gear Institute. You were involved from the beginning, but you weren't one of the founders. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I wasn't a founder. Basically, the Gear Institute started, it's got to be 12, 15 years ago. And it was, again, I started writing for Backpacker in 92 and just continued in gear coverage and really specialized in gear coverage for a lot of, since that time, I've done
most of your career,
just about everything. Yeah. But Gear Institute was 3 guys that were in the same boat. They were established gear writers. Justin Nyberg was a former editor of Outside Magazine. Peter was just primarily a ski coverage guy. He worked in the ski industry, wrote for Powder and Backcountry Magazine. And Tally was in the same boat of writing for freelance writing for a bunch of different publications. And they decided, well, we all have great experiences. We all know gear, rather than, provide condensed coverage to the various magazines we write for. Let's use our talents and also provide really detailed coverage on our own to our readers. And so they launched Gear Institute, and that's really what it was. It was they dubbed it the Institute, and we were the instructors or the experts that were providing detailed head-to-head comparisons in a wide variety of gear categories of gear. And I started right away with
everything.
them. Yeah, that's everything from ski and snowboard to climbing and trail running and hiking and backpacking. And I became the fly fishing and snowshoeing guy.
Okay.
Largely, I created snowshoe guidebook series for Mountaineer Books as well in those intervening years. So I was a snowshoe guy as well as hiking and fishing. So basically Gear Institute started that way as a hardcore professional gear testers providing really detailed comparison reviews of products and categories. And it's evolved somewhat over the years, actually quite a bit now. We recruited more writers and did more news coverage and one-off reviews instead of everything being 10 or 15 pieces being compared together. And now there's a evolution currently taking place where we're going to incorporate more reader-generated reviews as companions to some of the professional reviews. So we get those, give the readers a chance to weigh in with their own experiences about the products we're talking about.
That's a good idea.
I think it'll be a really strong tool to help people when they're looking for gear, to be able to see both what we as professionals do when we beat up gear and write about it, as well as what their colleagues and friends see when they actually use it themselves.
Right. That's a good idea. And you have another site called Adventures Northwest, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that's really just my personal blog site.
Okay.
And my work on it has been cyclical over the years. Sometimes I'm really active. Lately, it's been largely inactive. Again, partly because I've the past year we've been planning this move, and my time has been very limited.
Right.
Yeah, definitely distracted. So I'm anticipating booting that back up after the first of the year, and basically it's a way for me to share some of my own adventures. I've been planning and started the process of moving some of my trail research to that site. In addition to my gear work, I've written 18 guidebooks for the Pacific Northwest. So I've written several guidebooks for Mountaineer Books covering hiking and snowshoeing mostly. I've also written for National Geographic Books. I contributed all the West Coast coverage for their last few National Park Series books. So I provided that coverage for them. But
you're pretty prolific.
Yeah. I've created a lot of content over the last 30 years. So that's kind of what I see Northwest Adventures or Adventures Northwest being in the future is, like I said, I want to transition some of that trail research into that. Mm-hmm. I've got GPS logs that I want to post with the trail notes I have.
Oh, wow, cool.
And so people can download the GPS tracks and be able to use that directly. And
man, that would be a great resource.
So, so that's been a slow process because I want to make sure I'm getting it as updated as possible.
That makes
don't
sense.
necessarily want to have a 28-year-old GPS track out there that trails are pretty static, but they do change, and trailheads move and get closed. Right.
So what are a couple things you like best about testing and writing about gear? Is it just that you get to play with the gear, or is it actually going out and testing? I
love gear. I love, like as I said earlier, I like to learn new things, and so when I see new gear, I want to know how it works, and I want to know how it was made and designed. And so being a tester, that's a great way to do that.
Right.
Getting product going out and being paid to beat it up and sometimes take it apart or break it and try to put it back together. And frequently it means being able to talk to designers and the people behind the product and figure out their mindsets and what led them to design things the way they did. It also lets me help folks make the most of their money when they're looking to buy new gear, and I enjoy helping people. So being able to share my experiences is very rewarding.
That's cool. Do you have a lot of interaction with designers and product managers on the front side of the product? I was a product manager for a couple different brands, and I don't know that our guys ever reached out to a tester to get some feedback on something before they actually finished the design. It was usually an after the fact test.
At times I've had great interactions up front. Frequently over the years, I've taken pre-production samples out for testing and provided feedback on that ended up being changes in the final production model. So that's, I think, been a kind of a beneficial to both parties,
for
significant. Myself and for the makers, to be able to improve gear before it actually gets into production.
Exactly.
And a couple times, I know REI is the one that sticks out in my mind. We've had designers come to a handful of us writers and say, what do you really want to see in this category? The one that comes to mind is a pair of pants that 4 or 5 of us helped design. Just this was back in the late 90s, and the idea was create the ultimate trail pants, something that was, work for scrambling or light climbing as well as hiking and snowshoeing, something just rugged and useful. And we provided, we want 4-way stretch material that's super durable and pockets here and there, and all the features we wanted, articulated knees and crotch gussets and all of that. And they built us the pants, and we loved them. I gave them great reviews. In fact, I still have a pair I wear all the time. But they only went to production for one season because they were ridiculously expensive to build. Right. So at the time, again, late 90s, paying $150 for a pair of pants wasn't something most users were going to do, and that's what they ended up at retail as.
Well, and I can imagine if you get a hold of 4 gear testers and you say, what would you like in this product? It would be too expensive anyway, because you put everything in, whatever it was, pants,
exactly
backpacks.
What happened was, they asked us to dream big, and we did. So building all those articulated joints and
right.
4-way stretch shoulder fabric at the time was ridiculously expensive to get it thin enough and light enough to be useful. And
but you had a great pair of pants.
And they're still working great after 25 years.
Well, it's interesting. There's something to be said for that, because, now that we're all trying to make products that last longer and you don't have to replace them as frequently, if you spend $150 on a pair of pants and it lasts for 10 years, that's a pretty good value.
Exactly. And that's actually, I've transitioned some of my writing to talk about the durability and the usefulness of gear long-term, instead of buying the shiny, bright new thing every season. Find something that's going to last.
We're going to take a little break and give some love to our sponsor. Hey, do you love to read but don't always have the time to sit down with a good book? I'm the same, and sometimes I just feel like having someone else tell the story. Well, if you use Audible, then you know. If not, you're missing out. It's like having a library in your phone, and I use it a lot. Audible helps the miles fly by when I'm on the road, as I'm enjoying great books I discover or are recommended by friends. Get your free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/theoutdoorbizpodcast. There are over 180,000 titles to choose from. Go to audibletrial.com/theoutdoorbizpodcast and start your free 30-day trial with Audible today. And now back to the show. So is there a product or a product category you like writing about over all the rest?
Well, kind of like my college career, I've drifted all over the outdoor industry and followed different passions over the years. It's like I love to do different things, just like I love to learn new things. And so I've primarily, I started out in the hardcore hiker backpacker market, and that's really been the one constant throughout my career is the hiking coverage and the core trail user. But I've also been a fly fisher since, again, back to those days when I was 12, 13 and spent the money I earned mowing lawns on my first fly rod when I was 13, going down to that local hardware store, Dinkles, and buying a fiberglass 7-weight.
Nice, yeah.
Which, looking back, it's like, okay, at the time I bought a 9-foot 7-weight to fish a tiny mountain stream. Today I'm fishing with a 2-weight.
Yeah.
But, at the time, that 7-weight was considered the go-to all-around rod. And I was a 13-year-old that didn't know better other than what I read in Outdoor Life and Sports Afield. So, but so those are probably the categories I really am most passionate about, is hiking and fly fishing. And my favorite is to really focus on the crossover. I love to hike to fishing locations. My wife and I both, Donna's been at my side on this entire outdoor adventure.
That's
I've
great.
enjoyed. So we actually met in a mountaineering first aid course.
Oh, so, cool. That's great. Does she fish also?
She does.
Awesome.
We got her. I started to teach her myself, and that didn't go well. She just never took it up, which anybody that's tried to teach a spouse to do something, you realize that's a bad idea. So
yeah, it's challenging.
And so along those same lines, that the gear reviewing played a huge role there, because was invited on a press trip to Jackson, Wyoming, with at the time Brunton and Cloudvale, their PR company, working with them, and there was a press trip that they also invited spouses, and so we were in Jackson, and they gave the writers were going fly fishing on the Snake and the Grove, and gave the wives the option of either going out with professional guides and learning to fly fish, or going to Jackson and shop for the couple days. And Donna, being a hardcore outdoors woman, said, "There's no way in hell I'm going to spend 2 days shopping. So I'm not even going to spend an hour shopping." So she went and was fortunate enough to have a really great Orvis endorsed guide provide instruction. And
perfect.
By the end of the 4-day weekend, she was out catching me, and that's awesome. Continued for the last 20 years.
That's great. Good for her. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
What's the first piece of gear you couldn't live without? Probably your fly rod.
Fly rod was definitely, just as a generic, the fly rod was the first thing that in fact, I still have that first fly rod. The thing that really sticks out, though, as the piece of gear that really changed my life and has changed the way I hiked and did coverage, was my first Thermarest sleeping pad. Yeah. I didn't get that until actually I started writing about gear. I was sleeping on an old cheap closed cell Insulite pads forever. And once I started reviewing gear again, being in Seattle, Thermarest Cascade Designs was a local company. I actually wrote about them when I was still at the newspaper, as a local company helping support communities in our area. And I got to know the designers there and the owners there, John Burroughs. But that pad changed the way I thought about backpacking and backpacking comfort.
Changed a lot of our lives.
Yeah. And Thermarest was the hallmark of quality and performance for decades.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That was one of the things that I think made everybody realize that, gosh, we don't have to suffer back here. We can actually enjoy it. Which category do you think is seeing the most innovation these days?
Oh, I've been thinking about this. The easy answer is tech. Things like personal locator beacons and avalanche beacons, performance tracking tools. I just got Suunto sent me some of their new smartwatches to look at, and the technology is insane what's out there these days. But I mean, that's the easy answer. I think in terms of core gear, I think the most innovation, I'll go back to the sleeping pads or sleep systems. They've evolved a lot in the last several years. We went from that 1.5 pound self-inflating pad to 3 or 4 ounce, air pads that are just as insulating. And back in the day, the idea of sleeping on a air mattress was ridiculous because there was no insulation.
Right.
And now you can get something that's, the size of a Coke can and weighs just a few ounces and has as much insulation as that old 1.5 pound Thermarest. So.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah, there's a lot of creativity in there. And they're doing a lot with sleep systems too. It's no longer just the sleeping bag and the pad. It's a system thing, which integrates.
Yeah, and the bags themselves have gone from, I was used to carrying 2.5, 3 pound bags for a 3-season bag, and now you can get them for under a pound.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. Which category do you think could use more creativity and innovation? What are they missing?
Looking back on a lot of the changes, I think tents maybe, there's been a lot of great innovation in materials, but really there hasn't been any change in the structural innovation. That's just been a stagnant area ever since probably 20 years ago was the last big change with the popularization of hubs on tent poles.
Right.
And that allowed a big evolution in tent design. But since then, there's been a bit of stagnation in the structural design. I will note that I think Big Agnes and probably Nemo as well are the ones that are doing the most push on the edges of that design world. And Big Agnes especially, I know they're willing to go big with some design ideas, and sometimes those fail. I've had Big Agnes tents that literally were flattened in 20-mile-an-hour winds.
Oh,
and
wow.
I shared that with Bill, the owner, and he said, yeah, we've discovered the same thing, and we appreciate the feedback. And we've made these tweaks and just changing some of the pole placement, and they were able to correct that. But so that's, I think, is what's really needed are those companies that are willing to take the risk and push a design, and sometimes it fails. Yeah.
Well, that's how you learn. I mean, you learn you learn as much what not to do as what to do, right? So,
exactly. You can learn a lot from a failure. You can see, why it failed and avoid that, and find the opposite way to make it actually stronger in the long term.
Right. That's right. So walk us through a typical scenario of how you use and test a product. I mean, you receive it from the company. Do they give you some kind of direction, things they're looking for?
Really, no. When I started, especially when I started doing gear review for WTA for the Washington Trails magazine, I was kind of flying blind. Working with Backpacker right away, that was a godsend, because they had even in 91, 92, when I started working for them, they had a well-established protocols, and I adopted their mindset that I'd never review a product that I hadn't used extensively in the field or had one of my assigned teammates use. So mostly today, I mostly self-assign my features. I decide what topic or feature I'm going to cover, what category. For instance, last spring, I did a package on binocs for bird watching for Gear Institute. And so for something like that, I'll come up with, the kind of the criteria of what I'm looking for, specifically binoculars for wildlife viewing, bird watching, and animal viewing. And I'll call candidates or send out emails saying, this is what I'm looking for. These are my criteria. I want, something under $1,000, looking for both, compacts that can be used for hike to sites or backpacking use, as well as the car supported ones. And I'll get as many product as I can sent over, and then I'll put them out to use in the field in what I would think of as normal use situations. And like binoculars, typically it's a high price item. Usually those are loaned out, so I'll get those for 30 or 60 days, and but I don't baby them. I treat them as if they were my own or worse, yours. so
That's
it's
good.
like, well, if I break them, that's no money out of my pocket.
Right.
So
that's funny.
I tend to be pretty rough on the gear I test. I leave them out in the rain. I don't coddle them. But I try to use them in a normal type situations. I don't go out intentionally to abuse them, but I don't lean away from that if that's what the situation calls for. So we do that for as long as we can, compile our notes. I'll usually try to send them out with other testers I trust as well, or get their notes and feedback, and then I'll write up the reviews. And if a product is, these days I like to highlight the best use of a product whenever possible. So, if there's a best bird backpacking binocular, for instance, and then, or the best budget binocular. So if I've got 3 binoculars under $100, I'll really focus on which one is the best, which one avoids fogging and provides the clearest optics, and those that don't make the grade, if something really just isn't quality, I'll give the maker a call and say, we appreciate you sending this out. This is our finding. We're not going to include it in the review, but we wanted to let you know what we found. And so just because I get a product doesn't mean it's automatically going into a review. And that's, I think, a really important part of the testing is there's no guarantee that a product is going to be written about just because we're field testing it.
Right. Well, yeah, if it's not worthy, it's not worthy. That makes total sense. Yeah. So you must have extensive notes when you come back from, I
tend to keep pretty detailed notes.
Yeah, you have to.
I've evolved some pretty straightforward shorthands that I don't think anybody else would be able to understand. Right. And that's just, a simple 1 or 2 words sometimes is.
You don't have to worry about your notes falling into the competitor's hands. They wouldn't be able to decipher them anyway.
Yeah. If they see my notes on a binocular and it says heavy and fog,
what?
They may not say, so they're good in fog. I think, no, the lenses fog up when it gets moist. And
that's funny.
So there's definitely things, and my handwriting, is Donna tells me, is nobody's going to be able to read it anyway. So I can take
I have the same,
very elaborate notes, and nobody will be able to steal them from me. So.
Yeah. When I'm recording these podcasts, I have notes going, and I'm sure I'm the only guy that could read them and realize what the heck to do with them.
Yeah.
So you get outside a lot. That's pretty cool. Do you have a favorite activity? Is your go-to still fly fishing?
It is. That's probably what we do most these days. I mean, that's like, I've been doing this, as I said, a long time. I'm getting up there in years. And so
I'm Sam. I love it.
The 15, 20 mile hikes into high alpine lakes isn't something I do as frequently as we used to.
Yeah.
We still do a lot. So definitely spending a lot more time wade fishing and rafting,
cool.
raft fishing these days. But still, probably the all-time favorite activity that we still get out several times a year is to do a backpacking trip to a high lake, or especially in the Cascades or in the Clearwater areas of North Idaho.
Beautiful.
Hike into the creeks and lakes of the Wind Rivers in Wyoming. So that the hike and fish is really the ultimate activity for me.
Yeah. So when you go and you're testing gear, is your pack heavier than most? I would think you'd have a few extra things in there that some people might not, or 4 pairs of binoculars, or
Yeah, that has been the case in the past. They say with age comes wisdom.
Try to avoid that. Yeah.
In my late 20s and even into my 30s, there were trips in the heyday of my writing, when I was researching 3 or 4 trail guidebooks at the same time as I was writing for Backpacker and Outside and Washington Trails. So I was doing a lot of writing, but I was also spending upwards of 150 nights a year in a tent.
Wow. Yeah.
So to get that much coverage done, I was at times carrying 2 or 3 person tents on a backpacking trip. And
wow, yeah.
Set up a different tent every night I was out, just so I could get enough testing time into them.
Right.
So yeah, it wasn't unusual for me to carry a 60 to 80 pound backpack for a lot of those trips.
Yeah. Well, when you're young, you could do it. Yeah.
When you're young and dumb, it's
and stubborn, probably.
And stubborn. Yeah. Definitely that.
Yeah.
These days, I tend to be more selective of the gear I take out and focus on a few core pieces. If I'm going to review a backpack, I'll say, okay, we're taking this specific backpack. I'll take that new 5-piece rod from Cabela's or whatever. And so I'm more selective of what I take. So
yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. Do you have any advice or suggestions for folks wanting to get into the outdoor biz or outdoor gear testing biz?
Yeah, that's probably what we do most these days. I mean, it's we appreciate you sending this out. This is our finding. We're taking this specific backpack. I'll take that new 5-piece rod from Cabela's or whatever. And so I more selective of what I take. So
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. Do you have any advice or suggestions for folks wanting to get into the outdoor
Well, the smart answer is marry someone with a trust fund, I suppose.
That comes up a lot.
Yeah. Seriously, you can make a decent living in the outdoors. It takes a lot of dedication, a lot of hard work, a lot of time. I mean, like I said, if I wasn't outdoors testing gear, I was indoors writing about it. So I was putting in 100+ hours a week at times between, writing and designing magazines and actually out testing gear. So I would say plan on hard work, really find what you want to do and focus solely on that. After college decided, this writing thing is what I want to do. And I focused on that. And I, after a year and a half in the newspaper world, I decided I really want to get back to my outdoor life. I mean, that's as a junior high school kid and early high school, all the advisors were saying, you should, take the tests, and I would come back, be a forest ranger or a game warden, or it's like, so the outdoors has always been something that was in my mind, I guess. And after college, I realized, or after the newspaper, it's I need to focus on this. And so when the WTA option came along, I jumped on that and really said, well, the pay at working for a nonprofit is miserable. So I need to make a little extra income. So that's where the freelance spun off. I didn't want to take a job evenings running pizzas or something. So
right.
Figure out a plan and go for it, and know you're not going to make great money, especially starting off, but there's a lot of other rewards besides monetary rewards.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of other rewards, and it's better than it was. I started back in the day when the money wasn't that great either, but yeah, it's gotten a lot better, and it's a lot more professional these days, and there's a lot of angles and things you can do. That's good advice. Yeah. Do you have a favorite? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, there's with the death of print, or the die off of print, seems like there's a lot of doors closed, but there's a ton of doors open in the digital world.
Mm-hmm.
And that the amount of editorial content that you can sell to gear makers even. And
and I'm going to put a shameless plug in here for podcasting too, because podcasting is still a relatively new avenue for the outdoor space. And the beauty of podcasting is, someone can listen to you in their ear, tell them how to pitch their tent and in the backcountry, as opposed to watching the video. I guess everybody has phones back there now, but it's really, something that's available 24/7. So
absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. And podcasts are a great tool and a great venue for content providers and for advertisers.
That's right. Yeah. Do you have a favorite piece of gear that you've purchased under $100, or that maybe you probably don't purchase much gear, but
actually, I will say that the one thing I purchased at full retail, and I've got multiple pieces of it, is again going back to the getting older and body starting to fall apart, is a flip focal magnifier.
Oh, that's a good one.
Clip-on magnifier, clips onto a hat brim. It got to the point where I was starting to fish bigger and bigger flies just because I couldn't tie on the size 18.
I can relate to that. I can relate to that. Yep.
So that's having that 3x magnifier flip down off my hat brim and be able to tie on a fly without having to fumble to take my sunglasses off and put readers on.
Yeah. Well, and these fish are getting smarter. I think you have to fish, 20s and 22s now. It's like, what?
Yeah, it seems like it sometimes.
Crazy. Yeah. No, that's a good one.
But so that's really, and I like I said, I have one on my hiking hat so I can read my maps and GPS now. And I've got multiple fishing hats, and Donna has them on her hats, and my brother saw me, and so he's got them on his fishing hats.
Yeah, those are good. Yeah, well, you youngsters out there, you'll realize that what these are someday, but they're very handy. As we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to say to our audience or ask of our audience?
I I would, ask, I guess, that everybody that gets outside be respectful of the outdoors, leave it better than you found it. If you see garbage, pick it up, be a good trail steward, be a good river steward. But with that in mind, get outdoors. And there's so much of this world that we can't see from our computer screens, and there's so much more to life than the digital world or even the indoor world. Get out and see nature.
That's good advice. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and if people want to follow up with you, where's the best way? How can they find you?
Well, I'm not a big Twitter user. I share photos on Instagram at dan.a.nelson. If you want to Google me and look for some of my writing, I use my byline is Dan A. Nelson. I use my middle initial just because I know in my local community here, I think there's 6 other Dan Nelson. So so I have to use that middle initial to set myself off.
Gotcha. Cool.
Facebook, same thing, dan.a.nelson.
Cool. We'll link to that stuff in the show notes so people can see your work, and we'll link to the Gear Institute and Adventures Northwest so they can find that stuff too. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Dan. Perfect. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks. I've enjoyed it, and I appreciate you having me.
All right. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Outdoor Biz Podcast. Be sure to visit our website, theoutdoorbizpodcast.com, where you'll find show notes with links to everything we talked about and more. Subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll never miss an episode. And while you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or spread the word and tell a friend about the show. That would really help us out too. Be sure to tune in every week. And thanks again for listening to the Outdoor Biz Podcast with Rick Saez.